Well, good evening to you from Canberra, Australia, and hello wherever you may be watching. I'm Peter Jennings. I'm the Executive Director of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to our Indo-Pacific Leaders Dialogue webinar on the theme of withstanding terror in Afghanistan. It's our pleasure to be hosting a conversation with Afghanistan's Minister for Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Mohammad Haneef Atmar. With the United States and other countries having withdrawn military forces from Afghanistan, what are the prospects for maintaining stability in the country? What international support does Kabul need? And will it arrive in time to make a practical difference? What is the position of China, Pakistan, Iran, and other countries with stakes in Afghanistan's situation? What is the current and likely situation on the ground in Afghanistan? And what support can Australia provide? There are many issues to discuss. Shortly, we'll hear from Minister Atmar, who will be making an opening statement, and then we'll move into a discussion between myself, the Minister, and Professor Bill Maley from the Australian National University. Then I'll be happy to take questions from you, our online audience. So please get your written questions ready as we speak, and then I'll put some to the Minister. All in all, we will close at 5:45 Eastern Australian Standard Time, or in about 45 minutes. And now to introduce our special guest. His Excellency Mr. Mohammad Haneef Atmar is the Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Minister Atmar is one of Afghanistan's most senior leaders of the post-Taliban democratic era. He has served in several key government posts, including National Security Advisor, Minister of Interior, Minister of Education, and Minister of Rural Rehabilitation and Development. In May of 2020, Atmar was designated as Minister for Foreign Affairs, his fifth ministerial posting. Mr. Atmar has played an active role in Afghanistan's modern political life. In 2010, he founded the Rights and Justice Political Party and ran an energetic campaign for the presidency in the 2019 presidential elections before withdrawing from that final race in the interests of focusing on the Afghan peace process. During the 1990s, Mr. Atmar was an aid worker in Afghanistan, holding senior positions with various national and international non-governmental organizations. Mr. Atmar holds a master's degree in public policy and post-war development studies from the University of York in the UK, and he has published several academic works on the role of humanitarian aid in Afghanistan. Joining us also this evening is Professor William Maley. Bill is Emeritus Professor at the Australian National University, where he was Professor of Diplomacy from 2003 to 2021. Bill is a member of the Order of Australia, a Fellow of the Academy of Social Sciences in Australia, and a Fellow of the Australian Institute of International Affairs. Bill is the author of many works, but in particular for our purposes tonight, Rescuing Afghanistan, 2006, What is a Refugee, 2016, Transition in Afghanistan, Hope, Despair, and the Limits of State Building, 2018, The Afghanistan Wars, 2021, and most recently, Diplomacy, Communication and Peace, selected essays, also published this year. Minister Atmar, we're looking forward to your opening statement, sir. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Salam alaikum. Good afternoon, good morning, depending where you are. Thank you so much, Mr. Jennings, for invitation and organizing this event. It's a pleasure and honor to be together at this event with Professor Maley. I am one of his dedicated readers. His work in Afghanistan is very well known. With this, let me also take this opportunity to thank Australian people and government, and especially pay my tribute to the memories of those brave Australian boys and girls who sacrificed their lives in defending Afghanistan and the free world. We are equally appreciative of the Australian taxpayers' generosity that has advanced both reconstruction and development work in our country. With those appreciation and tributes, let me quickly look at three main topics about which I wanted to focus my introductory remarks, and then engage in a discussion with all of you. And I'm grateful for the interest that our participants today have shown in Afghanistan and in our situation. My first topic is the current situation and its humanitarian and human rights consequences. And second is the fighters and the threat that they pose not only to Afghanistan but also to the region and beyond. And finally, what the government of Afghanistan is planning to do together with our international partners. So I'll be very quick with all of these topics. First, on the security situation, we are probably experiencing the most massive, brutal, and opportunistic military campaign, a campaign of violence and terror by the Taliban ever in the history of our country. This wave started in mid-April after the announcement of the withdrawal of foreign troops from our country, and already has had devastating impact on our country. It has literally disrupted and eroded security, rule of law, and public service delivery in over half of our country. The loss of critical terrain and also cross-border trade points have had significant impact on humanitarian situation and then trade and market functioning in the country. We've lost already since mid-April over 6,000 people, 4,000 of them of our brave national security forces and over 2,000 from the civilians. The number of wounded would come to over 15,000 over the past couple of months. Again, this is the highest figure we have ever experienced over the past 2 decades. The humanitarian crisis is overwhelming, with over 18 million of our people now facing hunger and in need of immediate humanitarian assistance because of the devastating impact of the recent wave of terror and violence. The combined effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and the drought have been exacerbated by the recent wave of violence. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of displaced people and millions of people who are ready to leave their hometowns and may even cross border into our neighboring countries. And this situation is worsening because of the Taliban violence directed at our urban centers. Over 10 of our cities are now under direct attacks. The human rights situation is similarly staggering in terms of the patterns of deliberate violence and abuse by the Taliban and their affiliate foreign fighters. I mean, you must have seen the recent statement by the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, and also statements from the Independent Commission of Human Rights of Afghanistan. So the international bodies now have consensus that this is probably one of the worst humanitarian and human rights crisis that we are facing. Now, this brings me to my second point, that Taliban in this campaign of terror are not alone. They are assisted by their foreign affiliates. And these foreign fighters, who are a key threat, not only to Afghanistan, but the region and international community, come from various categories of transnational networks of terror. Category one will be those who have a global focus, such as Al-Qaeda and Daesh. Category two are more focused on the region, including the Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan, the ETIM of China, the LAT, Lashkar-e-Taiba of Pakistan, TTP of Pakistan, so you name it. These transnational networks of terror have a different agenda. Their agenda is not entirely compatible with the Taliban. The Taliban may have a domestic focus, but these foreign fighters do not. So by extension, the Taliban are actually assisting them in pursuit of their regional and global terror campaign. So we've been engaging our neighbors and the region, as well as our international partners, from China to Russia to Central Asia, India, and to our European and North American friends. All of them have been warned that these foreign fighters have a different agenda. They had it in the past, they have it now, and there is no reason to believe that they will not have it in the future. So it's a real threat that we have to deal with. This brings me to what is it that the government of Afghanistan is doing under the current circumstances while we have such a difficult security situation because of the lack of a transition process. And what is it that we would expect from our international partners? So I'll be very brief on this, and I may come back to this in our Q&A session. We will be pursuing two lines of efforts. The government of Afghanistan is focused on peace and reconciliation on one hand, and security and counterterrorism on the other. On peace and reconciliation, I must reiterate the government's firm policy position that we are committed to peace. We know that the Taliban were deceptive, have been deceptive. They did not honor their obligations as part of the Doha Peace Agreement. They ignored the international and regional consensus embodied in the UN Security Council's resolution and in statements of many international bodies for peace, reconciliation, cessation of hostilities. They were opportunistic, and they asked for the release of their prisoners. The government of Afghanistan, in good faith, released those prisoners, over 6,000 of them. And yet these prisoners have taken an active part in the campaign that we are seeing today, in this campaign of terror. So despite all of those, we are committed, and we will work with the Doha process. As we speak, there are meetings of our regional and international partners taking place in Doha to lend their support to the ongoing peace negotiations. But honestly, we expect more from our regional and international partners to achieve the goal of A, immediate prevention of attacks on cities, and B, accelerating the negotiation process to reach a political settlement and comprehensive ceasefire. Now, if it's our strong belief that if our regional and international partners address the Taliban with one voice and firmly, these objectives are achievable. So we are hoping that such a common position will be achieved during the next UN Security Council meeting and the ongoing consultation in Doha. Finally is our security and counterterrorism issue. Many of you may agree with me that Afghans have been fighting not just for Afghanistan, but also on behalf of all of the region and the international community. As I said, it has never been a civil war. It has always been proxy wars combined with transnational networks of terror, with symbiotic relationships with drugs and transnational criminal networks. So with this, Afghanistan is firmly determined to continue to defend Afghanistan and defend our regional and international partners. We have produced a new security plan. We understand that we have a challenging situation because of the decision for withdrawal of troops and the withdrawal of especially close air support assets. So this plan is prioritizing geographically. This plan is looking at rebuilding our forces while we are defending our critically important areas. For both peace and reconciliation and our security and counterterrorism lines of effort, we will continue to see engagement with our international partners, including Australia, and seek their support in this process. So I will leave it at this and then come back to any aspect of this that may be of interest to you and our participants today. Thank you, Mr. Jennings.
Thank you, Minister Atmar. And sadly, you paint a very distressing picture of the difficult situation that Afghanistan finds itself in at the moment. Are you able to share with us your judgment about the tactics that the Taliban and associated entities are engaged in right now in Afghanistan? For example, I understand that a priority has been to, on the part of the Taliban, has been to close off border crossings and to destroy roads and other forms of access into the country. What's your estimate of the strategy which is informing how the Taliban is operating, and where is this likely to progress over the coming next few months?
Well, first of all, their goal is victory through military strategy. This is clear. Many of our international partners told us that the Taliban's only objective is the departure of foreign troops from Afghanistan, and this was what they had the so-called jihad for. We said we don't believe it, but if you are ready to believe them and you are encouraging us to continue to negotiate with them, fine. So we will give it the benefit of a doubt and move ahead. And unfortunately, we were all deceived and taken by surprise that Taliban demonstrated their real objective, strategic objective, which is to conquer Afghanistan by force and use foreign fighters in an opportunistic manner, because these foreign fighters were not able to join them so actively because of the capabilities, the counterterrorism capabilities that existed in our country with the US and NATO and the resolute support partners. So now, firstly, they looked at our rural areas where our forces were extremely dependent on close air support because we could not. Our objective was to defend the entire country and not allow any spot in our country to become a safe haven for international terrorism. So in those remote areas, we had to keep our forces, our bases, and then they would be supplied logistically, but also in combat operations by air. Now, with the immediate drawdown of air assets and the diminishing capabilities, most of these bases were overrun, unfortunately, and we didn't have the time and the resources to bring them back to the main population centers. So that was number one. Number two, they tried to capture most of the border crossings so that the government of Afghanistan is deprived of its legitimate public revenue to finance they have a revenue from drugs and from transnational criminal endeavors that they undertake. We have to rely on our own revenue, national, and B, international assistance. So now they have turned to the cities. Over the past 3 weeks, we see their focus on urban areas. Again, they promised to the United States, Russia, China, members of UN Security Council that they would not attack cities, but they are attacking cities. And it's disappointing that we don't see a significant international voice here, that attacking cities is not only a violation of the promises and the obligations contained in the Doha Peace Agreement, but it will create a massive humanitarian situation, which would destabilize not only Afghanistan, but the region. So the Taliban have made their intentions quite clear to all of us. It's our time now to make our intentions clear, that we will stand for human rights, we will stand for our common security, and we will stand for our shared stability and prosperity.
Thank you, Minister Atmar. Let me hand over to Bill Maley for a question.
Thank you very much, Peter. A great pleasure to be able to speak once again, Excellency. And I'd like to ask a question that follows up from the mention that you made of the Security Council of the United Nations. On Friday last week, there was a discussion of Afghanistan at the Security Council. I was wondering if you could outline what specific measures you would like to see the Security Council take at this particular point to address the situation as it's evolving. And perhaps as a footnote to that, I note that yesterday the former Prime Minister of New Zealand and Administrator of the UN Development Programme, Helen Clark, raised the question of why Twitter in social media was providing a platform for the propaganda of the Taliban, which is being used to try to sap the morale of people within the Afghan population. And I'd be interested to know if you have any reflections on the responsibilities that those kind of companies, private companies, might have to play in this kind of situation as well.
Thank you so much, Professor. Nice to see you after such a long time. When we last met, I was wearing a totally black beard, but now it's quite gray at best. So good to see you again, Professor, and thank you for the excellent work that you are doing together with other prominent scholars for Afghanistan. Sir, we requested the United Nations Security Council to hold a special session on Afghanistan. I talked to my counterpart, Minister Jay Shankar of India, whose country is the current chair of the UN Security Council. And we said to them in one word, we want you to implement your own resolution, 2513. And that is a good enough resolution. If the Security Council believes in it, then they should undertake it. But more specifically, given the current situation, we outlined the two specific objectives. One, immediate prevention of attacks on cities, violation of human rights and international humanitarian law, and two, acceleration of the peace talks, reaching a political settlement and permanent ceasefire. And to achieve these two goals, we requested the Security Council to have unity. The unity of the Security Council will be key to the success of its resolution and strategies. So they prefer to have a briefing first on Friday, and then we participated. And I'm grateful to all of the speakers there. They made extremely good points. I mean, you saw the consensus there. Everybody condemned the level of violence. Everybody emphasized peaceful resolution and political settlement. Everybody called for respect for human rights and international humanitarian law. So we are fine with all of those calls. But those calls would not have any change on the ground in the behavior of the Taliban unless backed up by some real political, economic, maybe even law enforcement measures. So our request is, please first make it clear to the Taliban that it is time for them to honor their obligations, and it's time absolutely necessary for them to pay heed to the international consensus in this respect. And if the answer is no from the Taliban, then there's a wide range of instruments available to the UN Security Council and the international community, from sanctions, not only not lifting the existing sanctions, but adding new sanctions. Professor, a significant part of the Taliban political and military leadership is now visible. They are known where they live and what they do. So they will be certainly responsive to those sanctions. Second is also for the United Nations Security Council to work with Pakistan and demand serious action from Pakistan to disrupt and dismantle not only the sanctuaries from which these attacks and campaign is taking place, but also the logistics and the supply line to the war machine of the Taliban. That needs to be achieved. If the world is to see stability in this region and success in counterterrorism, the sanctuaries issue and the issue of logistics and supplies will have to be addressed seriously. Finally, it is our expectation that there must be some serious measures in terms of human rights compliance by the Taliban. And this may come to an issue of use of force. Now, we have the force, but we have certain constraints in terms of our capabilities. So the international community, for the sake of peace and stability in the region and the global community, may need and surely need to work with us to work for our common security goals.
Minister, I would like to follow up on that comment of yours just made by asking the question, so what can a country like Australia do that you would find useful to assist you in this fight? As you very kindly began by thanking our forces for their involvement in Afghanistan over many years, well now, regrettably to some, our forces have been withdrawn. But in terms of the immediate crisis that you're facing, what can a country like Australia do that is useful to Afghanistan at this moment?
Well, first of all, I would very much like, again, to express the heartfelt gratitude of the Afghan government and the Afghan people to our Australian friends. That's the first thing. Please accept gratitude from a grateful nation, a grateful partner. Second, please continue your excellent work and partnership with us. I understand that the forces are withdrawn, but continuation of the partnership is essential to achieving our common interests, common national security interests. These interests are common to not only to our region, but also to Australia, North America, and our European friends. So we must understand that while the Afghans are grateful for the enormous generosity of the nations around the world, but we must understand that we are in this together for our common interests. And that must necessitate the continuation of the partnership. More specifically, I would look at the two lines of efforts that the government of Afghanistan is pursuing, the peace and reconciliation and the security and counterterrorism. On peace and reconciliation, Australia is well positioned to work with our regional partners in the Indo-Pacific region, and all of those partners of that framework of cooperation are engaged in Afghanistan. So it may be an excellent framework of cooperation to look at Afghanistan. And work with the UN Security Council, with UN international human rights bodies, with all of our partners in the region to achieve those two specific objectives, prevention of attacks and political settlement. Now, I've had a number of excellent conversations with Honorable Minister Payne over the past couple of months, and when we've exchanged views on what Australia can do politically to work with the United States, NATO, Europe, and our regional partners in terms of achieving those specific peace-related goals. When it comes to security, obviously, we are grateful for continued financing and political support for our national security forces. I wouldn't go into details of a defense strategy here, but I did raise ideas of technologies that can be used to make up for the loss of air assets because of the drawdown of troops, and Australia could be an excellent partner in this. Of course, we want Australian diplomatic presence in Afghanistan. We are fully supportive and are committed to do whatever we can to provide security. Of course, it's a community of diplomats living there together, and the government of Afghanistan has by international conventional responsibility to provide such security. Finally, we will continue to request Australia's engagement in terms of humanitarian and development assistance. I am so grateful that the Honourable Minister stressed the fact that there will be continued humanitarian assistance given our dire situation at the moment with half of our country in need of humanitarian assistance. And also not to forget development assistance and particularly education of our young people. Australia has been extremely good with this, and we still believe that educational opportunities for Afghans will make a big difference and strengthen our capabilities for both peace and counterterrorism.
Thanks, Minister. I'll go to Bill for one more question, and then I'll put some questions that have come through from our audience. Bill?
Thanks. Minister, could I ask you a question about the negotiations in Doha? We've seen a report that the US negotiator is returning to Qatar, but a lot of criticisms have been voiced of his diplomacy, including to the effect that he's neither feared by the Taliban nor trusted by Afghans. And there have also been recent proposals for third-party mediation to be attempted either by a nominee of the Security Council, an idea floated by two former special representatives of the Secretary General in Afghanistan, or most recently by the possibility of a neutral state contributing a mediator. Do you think there's any value in this, or are stronger measures required in the current situation?
I think both will be required, essentially. We first need facilitation and mediation. And frankly speaking, our preferences for the United States to do that with support from Qatar, who is hosting the talks. And we've made it clear to both the United Nations and Qatar that the government of Afghanistan favors facilitation/mediation in that kind of structure and combination. Our problem, Professor, is that we've been never left alone to make our own decisions. Because of the enormous interests that the region and international community, state and non-state actors take in Afghanistan. So we need to provide a forum that is trusted by these actors, especially our regional partners. So that's number one, and we would like that to happen. Already Qataris are providing facilitation, and I had a good conversation with the Secretary General's personal envoy, who's a very good friend and very well respected diplomat in Afghanistan, that the UN needs to take a greater role in terms of facilitation and mediation. It's sad that there isn't any country in our region that could be trusted by everybody. It's such a problematic situation. So best thing is that the regional cooperation is also structured multilaterally in a manner that countries feel comfortable and attend. Over the past couple of days and another day to come, there are 3 meetings taking place in Doha rather than one. And all 3 on the same subject. One is regional partners, another is international and regional, and a third one is the Troika Moscow format. The reason that these are 3 meetings, because some of these countries do not want to attend if the other country is present there. But they would all have to attend when the United Nations is is hosting the meeting, convening the meeting, because they do so at General Assembly and UN Security Council and many other forums. So our first challenge is that we need to deconflict the regional cooperation so that they can come and help us with resolution of our conflict. And that is something for a small country like us terribly difficult to achieve. So it would be my appeal to the United Nations, UN Security Council, to provide that serious engagement in terms of facilitation and mediation, and B, provide a multilateral setting where all of these countries can come and express their views, and then finally reach consensus in terms of counterterrorism and peace and security in Afghanistan.
Minister, thank you. I'm conscious that we have just a few minutes left, so very quickly I want to put to you some questions that have come from our audience. A question that has been put by a number of people is to ask, is there any realistic prospect of negotiation with the Taliban at this stage, given their military position on the ground? What's your reaction to that?
Muted.
You're muted, Minister.
I'm sorry. My answer was yes and no in terms of the prospect of success. And no, if things do not change as they are now. If things change with us and with the regional and our international partners, there's a strong yes that I believe in. So if our region, our international partners with one voice, one unified message, counter the Taliban campaign of terror, we will have a serious prospect for peace. The Taliban will respond positively if there is one voice from the region and the international community. Second, if that voice is credible enough that if there is a failure, that the international community will confront the Taliban, then the prospect is absolutely there. It is feasible to expect progress in terms of peace in the coming weeks.
Thanks, Minister. Another question that a number of watchers have put goes to China's interests and motivations here. There was certainly extensive media coverage of the Chinese foreign minister meeting the Taliban political leader in Tianjin just a few days ago. What's your judgment about China's position in this situation?
Well, China has a legitimate interest, and there are serious threats to Chinese security coming from specifically ETIM, the East Turkestan so-called Islamic movement. But ETIM is not alone. It is hosted and aided by the Taliban. And it's part of the foreign network of Daesh in Afghanistan, and it is already positioned itself in northeastern Afghanistan, especially in Badakhshan, which borders China. So the threat has been serious, and China cannot ignore it. But China will have to become a central part of our regional and international effort for both security and counterterrorism and peace and reconciliation. China has been engaged. As we speak, the Chinese special envoy is in Doha attending meetings. But we would very much like to see more forceful and effective engagement from China, Russia, India, as well as Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, in addition to the United States, Europe, Australia, and Japan, to have a serious impact on both security situation and peace and reconciliation.
Minister Atmar, the last question I'll put from our audience goes to the situation we've seen over a few weeks where the Afghanistan National Security Forces in some areas seem to have very quickly been dispirited by the pace of Taliban gains and have not put up much resistance. Are you able to comment on what we're actually seeing on the ground? How has this situation emerged in terms of the Afghan National Security Forces?
Well, I will be very honest with you, my own people, and our international partners. There have been occasions, or mostly, that we were so proud of and have been proud of our national security forces, their bravery, their valor, their sacrifices, absolutely remarkable. But there have been performances in certain areas that we are not so proud of. This has very little to do with the courage of our national security forces. It is more related to the structures of support, and especially close air support, the absence of which actually led to the diminishing capability of our forces to put up resistance. Now, those situations and the factors that sustain that poor performance will have to be addressed seriously, first and foremost by the leadership of our government, and second also through assistance of our international partners. I believe you see the bravery of them in Kandahar as we speak, in Herat, in Mazar-e-Sharif, in Ghazni. There, I was speaking to some of them last night, and to even our very elderly leaders who have joined the forces with such bravery and dedication that is absolutely making every Afghan proud. But we will have to address the weaknesses where such qualities of our forces were not well demonstrated.
Well, Minister, speaking for myself, as a person who was a civilian in our defence establishment, working very closely with Afghanistan over many years, I can speak to the great respect and admiration that our own forces had for the Afghans that they worked with in Uruzgan province and elsewhere. We've come so quickly to the end of our time, Minister. I'm really grateful to you for you taking the time to speak to us in what I know will be an immensely busy period. I want to wish you courage and wisdom in the job that you're doing, and to pass on the great best wishes of so many people in Australia who support you and support the government of Afghanistan. And can I thank you once again for taking the time to talk to us this evening.
Thank you. And let me thank Professor Mali, and it was such a pleasure and honor to be with you on this event, and hopefully to see you back in Afghanistan one day. Thank you all the very best.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. And to our audience, thank you very much for watching. Look for the next ASPI event to join us virtually and hopefully in person at some stage in the future.